The coalition has promised to halve the fuel excise for 1 year, shaving off 25 cents a litre at the bowser after rejecting Labor's surprise tax cuts. Late last night, the Senate passed the government's $17 billion top-up tax cuts with the support of the crossbench and the Greens. The opposition has labelled it an election bribe and says its $6 billion petrol plan would save families hundreds of dollars. Mr Dutton will make the pledge in his budget reply speech tonight. He says the excise cut would provide quick relief, while Labor's cuts won't kick in until mid-next year.
Our plan obviously is designed to help families and to help pensioners and people who are really doing it tough in the economy at the moment. People are paying 30% more for their groceries and every cost has gone through the roof. So our plan starts straight away. People will get the relief at the bowser straight away with a 25 cent reduction in the price of petrol and diesel. Labor's plan comes in 15 months' time and it's about 70 cents a day by way of tax cuts.
The government says the opposition's promise to cut the fuel excise provides limited temporary relief. Treasurer Jim Chalmers says Australians will be worse off under the proposal.
This decision will haunt them every single day of the election campaign. We will not let them squirm off this hook. This means that if Peter Dutton wins the election, every Australian taxpayer will be worse off. If Peter Dutton had his way, Australians would be thousands of dollars worse off already because of his position on energy rebates and tax cuts and wages.
Okay, well, let's get some more on this story now. We're joined now by economist Saul Eslake in Sydney. Saul, good morning. Thank you so much for your time. So we've just heard there, Labor promising a tax cut for every Australian, the coalition promising to halve the fuel excise. But can you predict at the moment which plan is going to have the most impact on the weekly budget for Australians?
Well, the coalition's program will have a bigger and more immediate impact than the government's. That's because it starts sooner and the amount being offered in the first year is bigger than under the government's plan. But whereas the government's plan would ultimately benefit a broader range of people, the benefits of the coalition's plan will be confined to those who drive, and in particular who drive a considerable amount, and they are of course concentrated in the outer suburbs of Australia's big cities and in rural and regional areas, which are the areas that the coalition is targeting. It will be of very limited or no benefit to people who don't drive, who use public transport, who walk or cycle, people who the coalition assumes are probably not going to vote for them anyway.
So given, as you said there, that this is obviously targeting regional and outer suburban voters, is it likely that those on lower incomes will benefit the most from this fuel excise promise?
Well, some lower income earners clearly will benefit if they drive long distances to and from work or carrying members of their family around to whatever is the purpose. But higher income earners typically live in inner suburban areas where even if they don't use public transport or walk or cycle, they typically drive shorter distances and will drive more fuel efficient vehicles. So I think the benefits of this will accrue more to people based on where they live than according to what they earn or how wealthy they are.
The coalition's fuel excise cuts are only a 12-month, would only be a 12-month commitment. So what sort of an impact would that really have in the long term? After 12 months, is fuel going to skyrocket again?
Well, ultimately, what happens to fuel prices will depend on what happens to the crude oil price, which is determined on global markets and the exchange rate rather than the excise. But assuming they stay relatively unchanged, then the benefits of the cut that the coalition is proposing in fuel excise will disappear after a year, whereas the benefits of the income tax cuts that the government's proposing will linger for longer. Ultimately, they will, of course, be eroded by bracket creep as a result of ongoing inflation and wage rises, as always happens with any changes in income tax. But what the coalition is proposing is a short-term, bigger hit, but one which is by definition, by design, only temporary.
We've seen fuel excise cuts before. What sort of an impact have they had previously?
Well, very little, other than temporarily reducing inflation and reducing the cost of fuel to those who use a lot of it. But you wouldn't describe this as tax reform in any sense of the word, nor, for that matter, would I describe what the government is offering as tax reform in any meaningful sense of that word. Neither side of the political divide is really offering voters any form of meaningful, lasting, structural tax reform. What they're simply seeking to do in different ways is to purchase votes.